Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all here tonight to this special lecture in our series, not only because it's in a different language from before, but also because we're very happy to welcome Professor Nóvoa here to Gießen to explore with us today a topic which I think is something we've been sort of thinking about over the last months anyway, and that's sort of reimagining our future together. As we have discovered throughout this series of lectures this semester, the future of education is something we all feel very strongly about, and it resonates with us to think about it and to think about the importance for our society. And that applies both to educators, so we have quite a few academics here in the room today and people who are in the teaching business, so to speak, but also to policy makers and also to learners. So there are also some learners here tonight. I mean, we all always are learners, but there also I'm quite happy to welcome some of our students here tonight as well, and probably also online. This experience prompts us to reflect on the role of education not merely as a means to acquire knowledge, but as a cornerstone for fostering empathy, innovation, and also resilience, and in an increasingly complex world. Now, we're delighted tonight to have with us an extraordinary speaker who has dedicated his life to advancing this vital conversation around education. Professor António Nóvoa, UNESCO Chair on the Futures of Education and Honorary Rector of the University of Lisbon, brings a wealth of insight and experience to this critical discussion, and we were already able earlier to sample some of your knowledge. His work, your work, as evidenced in the UNESCO report Futures of Education, Learning to Become, challenges us to rethink traditional paradigms. It inspires us to craft a shared vision for education that is inclusive, equitable, and adaptive to the demands of the 21st century. Today's lecture aligns deeply also with the values and the vision of this university, of Justus Liebig University here in Gießen. As an institution dedicated to fostering innovation, interdisciplinary collaboration, and societal responsibility, we are acutely aware of the transformative powers of education. Professor Nóvoa's insights echo our commitment to equipping our students and also our academics suitably so that they can forge solutions to global challenges, embrace diversity, and create sustainable futures together. Professor Nóvoa's work aligns also with our vision of education as a vehicle for academic excellence, and just as much a means to inspire critical thinking and active citizenship. In today's lecture, Professor Nóvoa will guide us through ideas and frameworks that transcend borders and disciplines, urging us to imagine education as a collaborative endeavor, one that equips individuals and communities to navigate uncertainty and shape a better future for us all. Now, I would invite you all to engage fully with the insights shared today, both by thinking about them, but also probably by joining in the discussion after the talk. I would like to thank you, Professor Nóvoa, very much for coming here to Gießen on a frosty evening in January, and for sharing your expertise and your vision with us. And I would also like to thank, as usual, the team around Professor Braun for curating this lecture series and coming up with all those wonderful people who are visiting us and talking to us and inspiring us. So please join me in extending a warm welcome to our distinguished speaker, and then I would ask colleague Braun here to the stage. No, it's Charlotte Kitzinger tonight. Sorry, you have to explain that, but then, yeah, little applause for Professor Nóvoa just now.
Good evening. I would also like to extend a very warm welcome to all the guests in the auditorium and those joining us via the digital stream for today's presentation within the President's Lecture Series focused this evening on envisioning a new social contract for education and the futures we can reimagine and create together. It is, as we've already heard, a great honor and my distinct pleasure to be able to welcome Professor Dr. António Nóvoa, who will share his most valuable, vast and long-standing expertise and perspectives with us today on this topic. My name is Charlotte Kitzinger, and I am the Managing Director of the new founded College of Liberal Arts and Sciences here at JLU. So this topic is one that is especially close to my heart. Professor Nóvoa will present on the report Reimagining Our Futures Together, a new social contract for education, which was published in 2021 by UNESCO's International Commission on the Futures of Education. Established in 2019, this commission seeks to reimagine how learning and knowledge can create a more sustainable and equitable future for both humanity and our planet. Professor Nóvoa, as chair of the Research and Drafting Committee, has played a crucial role in developing this report. Because education stands at the core of UNESCO's mission, establishing it as a fundamental human right and a foundation for global peace and resilience. The previous commissions have already produced impactful reports on essential education issues approximately every 25 years. The first report, Learning to Be, was published in 1972 already, followed by Learning, the Treasure Within in 1996. The new report's title highlights two fundamental aspects. It uses futures in the plural to indicate that many visions of the future exist, and also emphasizes that cooperation is crucial. A new social contract for education can only emerge through collective efforts and shared responsibility across educational sectors and across national borders. Professor Nóvoa is highly esteemed internationally for his contributions to the history of education and as a leading expert in comparative education and teacher training history. He has significantly influenced educational policies throughout the European Union and established himself as a key expert on educational development in Europe and the Americas. He served as a rector of the University of Lisbon from 2006 to 2013 and currently holds a full professorship at its Institute of Education, where he is also honorary rector since 2014 and holds the UNESCO Chair on the Futures of Education since 2023. Throughout his distinguished 40 years career, Professor Nóvoa has taught at leading Portuguese institutions and over 30 universities worldwide, including Europe, the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Other prestigious positions include visiting professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and Columbia University in New York, as well as visiting researcher at the University Paris-Descartes and visiting scholar at the University of Oxford. He was also principal education advisor to the Portuguese president from 1996 to 1998 and presided over the International Standing Conference for the History of Education from 2000 to 2003. His academic achievements include a PhD in education from the University of Geneva and in 1986, and a second PhD in history from the University of Paris-Sorbonne in 2006. He has received numerous honors, including the title of Doctor Honoris Causa from multiple universities in Portugal and Brazil, and he was awarded the Grand Cross of the Portuguese Order of Public Instruction in 2005. He served as the Portuguese ambassador to UNESCO from 2018 to 2021. He has literally published hundreds of texts that were published in 15 countries and more than a dozen books. Some of his significant publications, just to name a very few, include Fabricating Europe, the Formation of an Education Space, together with Martin Lawn in 2002, Traveling, Not Arriving, an Intellectual Journey in 2011, and Governing Without Governing, the Formation of a European Educational Space in 2010. He also co-authored the article Nothing is New, but Everything Has Changed, a viewpoint on the future school in 2020, as well as the book Teachers Freeing the Future in 2023. He also published the paper Renewing the Social Contract for Education, a personal point of view on the UNESCO report in 2023, where he offers some personal notes on the reflections made in the report he will be debating today and whose drafting he guided. The report itself highlights UNESCO's ongoing mission to address global challenges through transformative education, with a focus on fostering gender equality, enhancing educational access in Africa, and driving sustainable development worldwide. This document, however, is less of a traditional report and more of an invitation for dialogue and action in educational matters. Today's lecture from one of the foremost leaders in educational research, policy, and the future of global education presents a unique opportunity to take part in this dialogue and to gain insights. Because educated dialogue and exchange are of central importance. We find ourselves at a critical juncture in our world today. Rising authoritarianism, exclusionary populism, and political extremism challenge to the resilience of democratic governance precisely when strengthening cooperation is essential to tackle those shared and borderless challenges. Despite decades of dedicated efforts to foster peaceful, constructive approaches to conflict, today's world is marked by escalating social and political divides. Hate speech, misinformation, religious extremism, and exclusionary nationalism, amplified by modern technology, are being strategically used to advance narrow agendas. Yet we know that knowledge and learning are at the heart of societal renewal and transformation. Education, the way we organize teaching and learning across lifetimes, has always been a catalyst for change. It has the potential to broaden our perspectives, to connect us to each other, and to strengthen our abilities for dialogue and collaborative action. However, the urgent need to rethink why, how, what, where, and when we learn means that education must do more to help us build peaceful, just, and sustainable futures. Professor Nóvoa will share his insight into the report that addresses exactly these pressing issues. As we consider the future, the report prompts us to reflect on education's crucial role. It not only invites dialogue and calls to action, recommending priorities and proposing a framework for a new social contract centered on two core principles: an expanded right to lifelong education and the recognition of education as a public and common good. With its emphasis on meeting learners and educators where they are, today's lecture thus provides an excellent opportunity to expand the conversation on the future of education. Professor Nóvoa, we eagerly look forward to your lecture and the rich discussion it will undoubtedly inspire. Thank you again for being with us today, and the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much to the President of the University. Thank you very much for your very generous and kind and careful presentation. Thank you for all your presence here. I will try to give you a brief point of view about this report, which is, as it was said, and I will get back to it at the end, more a kind of an invitation to reflect together than a report in the traditional sense of the term, with recommendations and whatever. And mainly, one of the important things of this report, that it was built to a consultation that involved 1 million people in the world. We did consult 1 million people to write this report. We consult young people, we consult children, teachers, families, policymakers, rectors of universities, teachers, whatever. We did a huge consultation, and the report, in a sense, is a kind of trying to put together the perspectives and the points of view of many people in the world, with this title, Reimagining Our Futures Together, a New Social Contract for Education. I must say that just at the last minute of the report, the title of the report was only Together, nothing more, Together. And it should be released only with Together. And then the people at UNESCO, they said, but together for the report, we need something more extensive. And then we arrive at this title in our last meeting, in the last meeting of the Commission. And thinking about the future, many people, the other day I give a lecture, and a professor of the university asked me, okay, I understand this idea of changing education, innovation, which is a concept that I don't use a lot, of another form of doing education, but he told me, but what are the scientific evidences that traditional pedagogy doesn't work? I want you to give me these kind of scientific evidences. And I begin to say to him that first, I don't use the concept of traditional pedagogy because it sounds to me that it's not a very good concept. But then I told him the scientific evidence is this, is the UNESCO statistics. We know that even before the pandemic and after the pandemic is worse, 250 million children and young people are out of school. It means that still today, about 15% of the school population is out of the school. But worse than that, half of the world's students leave school at age 15 without the minimum proficiency level. Let's say that we are not educating half of our students in the world. They are staying in school for 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, and then they leave school without a minimum. Something is missing. Something is wrong in this system. Something is wrong in the way how we think about schools. Something is wrong in the way how we do pedagogy. Something is wrong. So these are the scientific evidences for what we need to think in a different way. And to think in a different way and to think about the future, and this for us it was very clear in the Commission, it's not to try to anticipate the future, is not to try to control the future, is not to try to impose a vision of the future. And that's why we put in the plural, futures and not future. The two first commissions that you talk about, the Ford Commission in 72 and the Dialog Commission in 96, it was the International Commission on the Future of Education. Our commission was the International Commission on the Futures of Education. So it's not to try to anticipate, it's not to try to have a vision of the future. No, it was not our idea. Our idea is, how can we prepare ourselves? How can we prepare the young generations to deal with uncertainty, to deal with the problems, to have a better way of dealing with the questions? And one of the best, the most prominent members of the Commission, it's a wonderful scholar. For me, it's one of the best scholars of our days in social sciences, Arjuna Padurai. He wrote exactly that. The idea that education can help us to design our own transformations rather than to simply react to transformations that are imposed upon us. The idea that we are always struggling, what's happening with technology, what's happening with the digital, what's happening with that, what's happening with the transformations in the world, without taking our own design of our own transformations. And our exercise in the International Commission, talking about this idea of the new social contract, and I'm not going into the details of that, because the notion of social contract is a very difficult one in legal, philosophical, sociological terms. But what we want to say is that, in a sense, the social contract of school modernity, the social contract of the 19th century, the school of the 19th century, the way how maybe the best image to define, the best illustration to define the social contract of school modernity are the name of the institutions where teachers were trained. And the name of the institutions where teachers were trained was normal schools. Normal schools. Because the social contract of modernity, it was a process of normalization. Normalization of the buildings, of the school space, of the school time, of the curriculum, of the classes, of the pedagogies, of the methodologies. So we need to build a different way of understanding the work inside education and inside schools. And the way that is strongly based, and this for us was very important in the Commission, strongly based in a human rights approach. The idea that we are dealing with many disruptions, many problems, many difficulties, that's the first part of the report. And the Commission talks about the climate changes, of course, the digital disruptions, the democratic backsliding, the mobilities and migrations questions, the diversities, the automation of work, the life expectancy. We are dealing with many, many, many problems that needs to be seen through a humanistic point of view, a humanistic eye, a humanistic look, and based on this perspective, the starting point of the report is a humanistic approach. I will not develop this first part of the report, and I will go directly to the second part, which is the most important part of the report in terms of proposals. And in this second part, maybe we can use two phrases or two verbs. And the two phrases are, we need to protect schools. We need to protect schools and teachers, in a sense. And we need to protect schools because many people are talking that the school is an institution of the past, that schools are obsolete, that schools are not anymore ready to the challenges of the new century, that teachers don't know exactly how to educate. So there are many people criticizing schools and, in a sense, trying to destroy the idea of schools. And here it enters all the commercialization, all the privatization, all the processes that are going on in the world. And the Commission say we need to protect schools. And the protection of schools is, in our opinion, very important, namely at the light of three tendencies that are the digital and technological illusions, the idea that the technologies are going to change and to replace the schools in different ways, in different forms, in different shapes, but also face to the tendencies of homeschooling that were very important through the pandemic, and all the other discourses and speeches that think of a kind of school delusion. For instance, the idea of ubiquity, which is very popular, the idea that we have now a kind of ubiquity of education. Education happens everywhere, happens at home, happens in computers, happens in the cities, happens everywhere. It's true that education has a kind of capillarity and it can happen in very different spaces, but it does need to lead us to devalue the importance of an institution like the schools. And finally, it's probably a little more difficult to understand a discourse excessively focused on learning and on learning issues. What our colleague Gert Biesta talks, the idea of learnification, a critique of learnification. Because the problem of a discourse that is excessively focused on learning is that it tends to put at the second place the idea of education. Or the learning process can be individual, sometimes. The educational process, they need to be collective. And when we put too much emphasis on the learning discourse, we tend to emphasize a more consumistic or a more individualized relationship between children and knowledge. And when we put the focus on education, we tend to put a more clear emphasis on the collective approach, on the tendencies to collectivity. And that's why it was already in the presentation. For us, it was very important, this phrase from Maxim Green, a wonderful philosopher of education, from one of the first generations of North American feminists in the 60s, when Maxim Green says in a discussion with the works of Hannah Arendt and Walter Benjamin, when he says, I cannot imagine a coherent sense of purpose in education if something common does not arise in a public space. If something common does not arise in a public space. So the idea of the common and the public, education as a common good, as a public common good, it was very important in the writing of this report. A report that makes the defense of school as an institution that is different. Schools are important not because they are equal to the families, not because they are equal to the societies, but because they are different from families, because they are different from societies, because they work in a different time and in a different space, because we can do in schools different things that we cannot do outside schools, because inside the schools we have a different space, a different relation with time, a different relation with the process of education, and this difference is the key explanation for the importance of schools. Schools are not a prolongation of society. Schools are not a prolongation of families. Schools are a different institution, and that's why we need to protect schools without questioning the importance of other forms of education, without putting in question the importance of families in education, but saying schools has a different roles, has a different mission. And this mission is done in a different time and in a different space. And this idea of difference, it's very important to understand the importance of schools as different from families and from societies. To protect schools, yes, but also to transform schools. And so the idea that we cannot stay in only a kind of a conservative protection of schools, and yes, there are many important things in schools that need to be conserved, but we need also to transform schools. And in this idea of transformation of schools, our most important concept was the concept of metamorphosis. And why did you go to this concept of metamorphosis? Because we didn't want to go into concepts that we need to change everything, we need to begin from scratch, we need to do it everything again, schools are outdated, schools are obsoleted, schools don't serve anymore. And so these ideas that are repeated and repeated once and once again each day about the useless of schools, we didn't want to go there. And we need to say, we need to transform as a process of metamorphosis. It means to recognize what is done, to recognize that there are millions of things that are very important that are being done in the world, recognizing the work of teachers, recognizing the work of public schools, and trying to, through this recognition, to trying to go to a process of metamorphosis, of transformation, of changing of the form of the schools, of the shape of the schools. And always going in this process of metamorphosis with the idea of the common. The common, and I will go to talk about this on the second part of my intervention. The common was the main concept of the report. And that's why the report, in some moment, we try to put only the title together. The idea, working with the idea of common, was for us probably the most important reflection in the report, and mainly in the second part of the report that I will address in the next few minutes. And for us, the common, and this is very important, is the idea of common work. In English, we can use a concept. It's not a very good English, but some intellectuals use these words, the idea of commoning, so putting it in a kind of the action of the common. What for us the common is the common work, what we can do together, what we can do through a common work. So common goes to commoning much more than to community. So our common is not the common of community, it's the common of common work. It's the common of working together with different persons, different perspectives. And from this, we go to proposals, to some concrete proposals, not in terms of recommendations, but in terms of opening a dialogue with the people, with words that are not new, but if I can say something, namely to the students, is there is nothing new in pedagogy. Everything has already been invented. Everything has already been invented, and so there are not the idea of a novelty, something that no one has seen yet. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. We work with concepts, with experiences, with traditions that are there for many years, and we do a process of metamorphosis. We do a process of changing according to our needs, to our reflections, to our projects. And I will talk about 4. In fact, the second part of the report has 5 chapters, but I will leave the last chapter. I will focus in the 4 chapters, initial chapters of the second part of the report, which are, in a sense, this is my personal reading of the report, which are, in a certain sense, about pedagogy, curriculum, teaching profession, and schools. So the idea of these 4 chapters goes, and we use a main concept for each one of these 4 chapters, and these 4 concepts are a kind of dedoubling, a kind of translation into pedagogy, into curriculum, into teachers, and into schools of the central idea of the common. What I'm going to propose you is 4 concepts that are the translation of the common in pedagogy, in curriculum, in teachers, and in schools. And that's the process how the Commission has been working on that. And as I told you, there is nothing new in these 4 concepts, but they are a revision, an updating of the best things, of the best experience, of the most inspiring ideas that we have seen throughout the consultation of 1 million people in the world. And these 4 things represent the best that we have seen. In pedagogy, the main concept is the concept of cooperation. And so the common in pedagogy is cooperation. The idea that cooperation is directly linked, please follow me because this is very important in terms of the economy of the report. Cooperation is linked with the idea of work. The school is the place where the students are going to work. Work means read, means writing, means researching, means laboratory, means libraries. The school is the place where the children are going to work in cooperation. And so the school is not mainly the place where the students are going to listen to some lessons, to go to some classes, is the place where they are going to work. They are going, if I want to use a metaphor used by a neuroscientist, a North American neuroscientist, where they are going to be seated in the table of the knowledge. They are going to be seated in the table, working together in cooperation, working together in cooperation. With the teachers, of course. The teachers are there. The teachers are essential. The teacher-student relationship is absolutely indispensable. But the idea of cooperation between the students and the idea of work is a central idea in this new social contract for education. And it's in schools as it is in universities. A French philosopher, a guy from the beginning of the 20th century, a brilliant philosopher, a guy named Handeln, he wrote a piece in 1920. In 1920, he wrote a piece where he said this phrase. It's a provocation, of course, but follow me. He said, I dream with a school where the student works and not the teachers. Who works in schools are the students and not the teachers. Of course, that for the work of the students, teachers need to work a lot also. But it was a kind of putting the school work in a different way. And I remember I was talking about Drew Foss, the president of Harvard University, with your president. And I remember that that same moment, it was 2012, if I remember well, the medical school in Harvard, they made a huge change in the curriculum of the medical school and the dean of the medical school, he presented the new curriculum in an auditorium with transmission online to all the world, and he said the main point of our change in the curriculum of Harvard, and as you know, the medical school of Harvard is the best medical school in the world. He said the main point is the following. Here at the medical school in Harvard, we have the best professors of medicine in the world. We have the best professors of medicine of the world. We are going to recruit them in India, in China, in Germany, wherever. We have the best professors in the world. Nevertheless, we know that our students learn more from each other than from us, their extraordinary professors. We know that the best we can is to put them working together, and that they will learn better working together than just listening to the extraordinary professors that they have. So the idea of cooperation is a strong idea. It's an old idea in pedagogy, yes, but it gains in our days a new perspective, and it's one of the pillars of this new social contract that we are calling in our commission. Then we have a second concept related with curriculum, and the concept related with curriculum is a concept that comes from a very important report by the MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, that wrote a report a couple of years ago saying the third scientific revolution is the revolution of convergence. They are avoiding the concept of interdisciplinarity, they are avoiding the concept of transdisciplinarity, and they are going to the concept of convergence. Convergence of subjects, of disciplines, of knowledge, saying that everything that really matters in science, everything that really matters in science, don't happen inside the discipline, it happens across disciplines. It happens in the convergence of disciplines. It happens in the convergence of knowledge. It happens in a different way between science and humanities, between arts and humanities, between engineering and medicine and biology, between all the cross disciplinary approaches that you know. And probably we need to think in the same way in school education. We need to have the subjects, yes, we need history, we need mathematics, we need literature, we need philosophy. Yes, we need, but it's not enough. It's not enough to educate our children. We need to have a kind of pedagogy, a kind of curriculum of convergence that goes into themes, into questions, into problems, addressing questions that need different disciplinary tools, that need different disciplinary approaches, and that cannot be only in a kind of fragmentation of the curriculum that comes from the 19th century, that comes from the social contract of school modernity, but that needs to be now, in a sense, not eliminated, but revised and updated. As you know, I'm not giving you any news about that. The most important thing in science happens always when 2 or 3 or 4 different disciplines work together. That's where comes different approaches, different ideas, when comes different discoveries. That's where the curiosity, where the strength of science is there. In education is precisely the same thing. We need to put our students working in problems, working in teams, working in things that are across different approaches, and not only, I'm saying not only, inside the disciplines. And of course, talking about cooperation and talking about something happened here, management agent. Okay, wonderful. No, not yet. Okay, thank you, thank you. Talking about cooperation and talking about convergence is obviously talking about collaboration in terms of the teaching profession. We all know that the normal schools imposed an idea of our profession which is a very isolated profession. Me with my students inside my classroom, giving my courses, it's a kind of an isolation that has some important things. It created a space that is a space protected. It created some kind of relationships, and it can create some empathy between students and teachers. It's important, but it's not enough. We need now new educational environments. We need to go to the laboratories, we need to go to the libraries, we need to invent different spaces for education where different groups of students work together with different professors, with different teachers in a kind of collaboration. Collaboration is a very interesting word because it's very easy to understand. Co-labor action. Action through a joint labor. Through a joint labor. It's very, so it's not about an imposed collaboration. It's not about saying, because if the schools are organized by classroom, through classroom, I don't need to collaborate. I don't need to collaborate to give my lesson an hour in mathematics or in biology or in philosophy. I don't need to collaborate for that. But if I understand a different way of organizing our activities, collaboration comes, and it's a very important and a very definitive responsibilities inside the teacher profession. And it goes to universities, because universities, that's not my topic today, that's the topic where I'm working in Brazil, and I'm very engaged in this topic in Brazil, need to change radically their programs of teacher education. We are not educating well, we are not training well our teachers, not in Europe, not in South America, not in China. We need a different approach to teacher education, a very different approach to teacher education, where the idea of collaboration is very important, but it will lead me to very different reflections, and it's not the theme of my intervention here today. And finally, to end, before 2 or 3 closing remarks, the 4th theme about schools, and to define this 4th theme about schools, this translation of the common in school life, I did go back to a very well-known person on the 70s, a guy named Ivan Illich. He was from Austria, but he made most of his work in Mexico, in Cuernavaca, in the 70s, and he invented at that moment the concept of conviviality. The idea that we need to have a convivial society, and to have a convivial society, we need to have the tools for conviviality. That was the title of his book, was The Tools for Conviviality. And one of these tools is education. And education is probably, I don't want to exaggerate, but it's probably the last institution that rests to try a convivial society, to try to live in peace with other people, to try to educate in dialogue, in understanding, in respect, in respecting diversities, in respecting the other. The last institution that we have in our societies to try to fight fragmentation of the world, to try to fight polarization of the world, polarization of societies, polarization of people, to try to go ahead with the idea, which is of course one of the main ideas of UNESCO, that the idea of a common humanity, of an humanity that can live in common with all diversity, with all the diversities, all the different ways of living, different ways of thinking, different ways of connecting. And conviviality has questions related with empathy, has questions related with care, of course. I'm not going into that direction in my address to you today, which gain a bigger relevance in the pandemics, but it goes also through a very important point for us in our report. And this is about democracy. Democracy in schools. And talking about democracies in schools is talking about participation. It's talking about inscribing the voices of children in life school. Children with 3 years old, yes, they can have a voice. With 6 years old, yes, they can have a voice. With 10 years old, with 15 years old, it's not the same kind of voice. It's not the same kind of participation, but it's absolutely central. If we want, maybe it's too late, I don't know. I was listening to Trump in a couple. Maybe it's too late, I don't know. But maybe if we want to try, once again to have a different society and a different way of connecting with others. And one of the processes of the report is that we were one of the main documents of the Summit of the Future that was organized in New York in 2024. So last year, September last year, there was a Summit of the Future in New York, and the report was one of the main documents of this Summit of the Future. And after many discussions, during many years, the most important declaration of this Summit of the Future was a declaration which name is Giving Young People a Voice. It's the idea that we talk a lot about young. We talk a lot about young people. We talk about what they do, what they don't do, what they see, what they don't see. We talk a lot about young people, but we are not being able to give a voice to young people, to give them a voice, and to give them a voice, it's, in our case, to give them a voice inside schools, inside education, inside a democratic life, inside our schools. No, I know that some people say that's demagogy. The students are going to decide if they want to learn mathematics or they don't want to learn mathematics. No, they are not going to decide that. That's our decision. That's our decision. But they can decide lots of things about the school. They can decide about lots of processes, lots of things that are going on about schools, and deciding that they can feel like being inscribed as part of the life of a crucial institution where they are going to live 10 years, 12 years, during 6 hours a day. It's a huge part of their lives, and so we need to give them a voice. And this is part of these 4 concepts that I talked to you, the concept of conviviality. So pedagogy, these kind of 4 translations of the concept of common. In pedagogy, cooperation. In curriculum, convergence. In teachers, collaboration. In schools, conviviality. And these were, and then the 5th chapter is about issues of citizenship and so on, but I don't have the time now to elaborate on that. So let me end, because it's time to end, saying what our colleague was telling us, and I like to present this report like this is not a report. Ceci n'est pas une pipe, no? This is not a pipe, no? The famous painting by Magritte, and I like to present this report saying this is not a report. No? This is not a report in the traditional sense of the term. This is an invitation. This is an invitation to dialogue. This is an invitation to discuss. We have ideas to share. We don't have recommendations to do. We know that many of these things are being done in the world. We know that many of these things are happening in the world, and that's why our last decision, when I say our, it's UNESCO. If I'm not anymore at UNESCO, but in a sense, I am still there yet. So our last decision, taken in December in a forum in South Korea, is to create the UNESCO Observatory on the Futures of Education. And so what we want in this observatory is to know, to share, and to publicize things that are happening in the world, maybe related with the report, maybe related with ideas that are in the report, or not, but that we need to know, that we need to share, and that we need to publicize. Because, as the wonderful French philosopher Edgar Morin wrote a couple of years ago, and he's still alive, with more than 100 years, and still writing, and still thinking, and still doing very important reflections, he told us a very important thing. He said, in education, I'm seeing in the world thousands, millions of very interesting things. Very interesting things are happening in all regions of the world. But these things are not known, they are not shared, and they are not visible, they are not publicized. They are like experiences that stay in their coin, that stay in their part of the world, that stay in their region, and they are not getting together to form a movement of transformation of school. This movement of transformation of school, we call it a new social contract for education. That's what we call to this process, to this movement of transformation that are not going to happen. Not going to happen in a new theory, in a new policy, in a new report, in a new method, in a new technology. No. The change will not come from there. Will not come from the sky. The change will come from the ground. Will come from the ground. For what's happening now in many schools, in the work of many teachers, in the writings, in the reflections, and that's what we need to understand. And we need to give them this visibility, and that's why we are now organizing this UNESCO Observatory on the Futures of Education. We have talked here in the presentation. Now we'll end with this. The idea that education has a great transformative power. Yes, but only a transformed education can be transformative. It's not enough to say that education has a transformative power. It's wonderful to say that, to repeat Mandela, to repeat Malala, to repeat all these kind of very nice quotes. But we need to say the second part. It's not the education as it is now that has this transformative power. It's a transformed education that has this transformative power. That's probably one of the main ideas of the International Commission and the idea that I wanted to end this presentation to you. Thank you very much.
Very much, Professor Nóvoa, for this enlightening and very inspiring talk. Please sit down, choose the seat you like best, and I'll take the other one.
Okay.
Thank you. One of the key takeaways for me is the reminder of our deep interdependence on this shared planet. This explicitly includes education and learning, and it is evident that we must tackle these challenges collaboratively, embracing both our diversity and our interconnectedness as nations and people. And the global issues we face impact us all, and education as a public endeavor and common good is one of the fundamental and probably most important tools available for addressing these issues. That is what I again learned today. And also I walk away from the report and your presentation with a sense of hope, despite all the problems. And despite the significant and complex issues confronting us, we stand at a unique moment in history where we have unprecedented access to knowledge and tools that facilitate global collaboration, and the potential to engage humanity in creating a better future together is immense, as well as the problems. But it is up to us to actively work toward the world we want to envision and to shape educational systems that are equipped to meet the needs of the future. And with this in mind, I now have the privilege of asking you a few questions before we invite the audience to join in the conversation and share their questions. And of course, the report addresses all levels of education, and from primary and secondary schools to universities. It does not primarily focus on higher education. Nevertheless, universities have a significant responsibility in shaping and renewing education, not least because they educate and train young people who will go on to work in all other areas of education. The University of Gießen, for example, is a center for teacher training for all types of schools, with about a quarter of our 28,000 students studying to become teachers. Our central concern, therefore, is how we can enhance a higher education for the future, or the possible futures, as you told us. The report, as well as many other scholars, argue that to remain relevant in our rapidly evolving context, education must shift away from rigid preset curricula, which you also talked about, toward more adaptable, situational and lifelong learning, as well as embracing competence-oriented approaches. And however, preparing students for an uncertain future entails equipping them for jobs, technologies and societal structures that do not yet exist, even for schools that don't exist yet for the future. And we must anticipate the skills that will be essential for them in, let's say, 2050, where social skills and emotional intelligence may even matter more than pure intellectual abilities that are maybe easier to automate. And this leads us to a pivotal question: what does this mean for the future of universities if preparing for the future necessitates a fundamental rethinking of the goals and methods of higher education? How should universities adapt? Or in practical terms, I would like to pose the following questions to you. What current practices in higher education should we continue to pursue? and which practices should we consider leaving behind, and crucially, what new methods or structures should we invent to equip students for an unpredictable and rapidly evolving future?
Okay, that's a good nice question. Thank you. I would say for universities what I say to education and to schools. For me, the university is a place where we come to work and to study. And so we don't come here to 3 to 4 o'clock to go to the class of history, of mathematics, or whatever. We need to work. We need to understand our work as a place to work, to study, to research, a way in a process where cooperation is for me very, very important and is central. I don't go so far as the medical school of Harvard, but in the medical school of Harvard, they stop teaching all kinds of disciplines. They say it's not useless. Our time is precious. We need to keep our time for more important things, for engaging with the students, for working with them. The anatomy or other things, they can see it online. That's not a problem. We don't need to teach them. They just can go and see. So I don't go so far because I have a kind of, in my tradition, the lecture can have, like George Steiner said, an important place in the university. But it's not the main place. It's not the main mission of university. University needs to be a place for research, for thinking, for studying, for being together, for discussion, and it's not. In most of the cases, it's not. In most of the cases, we still are doing a kind of... I think we have in our minds, and when I say we professors, we have in our minds an university that doesn't exist anymore. And that we think that it still exists, but it doesn't exist. I remember in 2014, I was in Brasilia, at the University of Brasilia. And I was with the rector of the University of Brasilia, which is a brilliant engineer. I was telling him, I was trying to talk with him about this. And he told me, António, I don't understand. What's your point? I don't understand what's your point. I have my classes. I go there from 6 to 7, 7 to 8. I give the class. And I try to do it the best I can. I don't understand what you're talking to me. And I told to him, Ivan, you know what's happening in your auditoriums, or you don't know? I say, yes, I know. I know that in this moment there are classes in all the auditoriums of the university, a wonderful building designed by Oscar Niemeyer. And I told him, Ivan, can we go and do a walk to the different lectures that are happening? And he told me, I can't do that. I'm the rector of the university. I cannot enter in the rooms like that. So I was also the rector of the university. I entered in the rooms. People are happy. That's not a problem. And the University of Brasilia, they have like rooms like this one. It's more or less 100 seats. It's more or less. No? And you enter and say, in this moment, all the rooms are full. Everyone is there, all the students. We don't have any more space for the class and so on. We wanted to go to a walk during 1 hour. The room where there are more people, there were 7 students, not 100. It was 7 students. And from the 7 students, no one was taking attention to the lesson of the professor. And so we have a kind of an illusion of an university that doesn't exist anymore. And we are repeating the same kind of things, and we are not being able to invent a new way of being at the university. And this new way, it's much more difficult, it's much more engaging, it takes much more time, it takes much more engagement by the professors, it takes much more attention, it takes much more knowledge, it takes work in laboratories, it takes work in many fields, but that's what we need. Otherwise, we can do everything online. Otherwise, we can dispense universities. And we can say, to do this, better online. Better online because the professors are better, the Khan Academy is better, they explain better the different subjects, so we don't need any more universities.
Thank you. I hope we do need them, or I'm sure, I'm convinced we do need them, but I'm also convinced we need to change a lot of things.
And that's why the concept of difference, it's also very important in universities. Universities are important because they are different. They are different from companies. They don't do the same thing that companies. They are different from other institutions. And when universities come, that's one of our biggest mistakes. The idea that universities, we need to do the management universities like if they were companies. We need to do technological developments like if they were companies. We need to do everything, but we have the other institutions to do that. Our mission is to do a different thing. It's not that what they are doing is not important, it's very important. But our mission is different. If it's the same that other institutions, we'll be useless. We'll be useless.
Yeah, I can relate to that. And as Yuval Noah Harari aptly states in his new book, Nexus, which some of you might have read, history isn't the study of the past, he says, it is the study of change. And this underscores that history not only teaches us about continuity and transformation, but also about, it reveals the mechanisms of change itself. And we talked a lot about the critical turning points we're facing and the possible futures filled with extraordinary opportunities on the one side and others fraught with unimaginable danger we haven't yet experienced as mankind. We are facing trouble with authoritarianism, populism, and political extremism that threatens democratic governance. And as you said, right-wing global cooperation and solidarity are needed most to address those shared borderless challenges. And despite decades of educational efforts at universities, but also at schools, we continue to struggle with effectively countering dehumanizing forces like racism, bigotry, intolerance, discrimination, but also inequality and poverty. And it is essential that our power structures shift from domination to cooperation. This is what you talked about as well. And while digital transformation offers unprecedented and almost limitless access to information, which could mean more democracy and also new educational opportunities, it also introduces significant risks, as for example highlighted by Mustafa Suleyman, the co-founder of the AI company DeepMind. So clearly there is no one-size-fits-all solution and no easy solution to these complex challenges. But I would love to hear your perspective. What are your approaches to developing an education program that not only equips learners with the knowledge, science, and innovation needed to build sustainable futures, but also fosters unity, humanism, empathy, and solidarity?
I believe that last week I was in Paris, and during the last years, you know that there is the Teachers' World Day, which is October 5, and in each of these World Teachers' Days we have a motto. So we have a motto that goes throughout the world and it's celebrating in all the world. And I have been engaged in the three last mottos of the Teachers' World Day. So in 2022, it was related with our report. The transformation of education begins with teachers. So that was in 2023. It was, I don't remember anymore what was the one in 2023. Bon, in 2024, it was about the teachers we need for the education we want. It was about the lack of teachers and so on. And last week, I was at UNESCO, and I told them, I would like to propose the motto to 2025. And the motto that I'm proposing for 2025 is to recover the great humanistic mission of teachers. So to put the emphasis on the humanistic mission of teachers, because we have putting the emphasis on the technological mission, on the learning mission, on many other things, not enough in the humanistic mission. And it goes directly to the reflection that was proposed by someone from the classical studies, Michael Epstein, when he wrote this phrase that I like a lot. He say, what are the mission of universities is to educate humans. And when you say educate humans, you are raising immediately questions of empathy, questions of sensibility. So to educate humans, by humans, and so you are put the same kind of characteristics in the teachers and in the professors. So they are humans, so they have sensibility, they have empathy, etc. And then he ends to educate humans by humans for the sake of humanness. He don't use the concept of humanity, he says humanness. But humanity, it's the same thing. For the good of humanity. So if we lose this third dimension, if you lose the dimension that we are working for the entire humanity, for the sake of humanity, we can go into an education that can be easily authoritarian, easily disconnected of the main humanistic endeavor. And that was one of the reasons why, against many countries at UNESCO, our report begins with human rights. Our report begins with human rights. And when I present the report, I talk about it's not well said. It's even, I think it's wrongly said, what I'm saying. I talk about the old human rights and the new human rights. And of course, there are not old or new human rights. Human rights are human rights. They are a totality. They cannot be defined as old. But when I talk about old human rights, I'm talking about human rights that are inscribed in the Declaration of 48. And so, which are typically the economic and social rights about work, about freedom, about lodgement, about health, about justice, whatever. But now we are facing what I call the new human rights, which were not presented in some way in the Declaration of 48, and which are related with many of the things that you are talking about. Climate changes. In the report we use a phrase that is a paradox. We say we need a new humanism that it's more than human. So to talk about the humanism that it's more than human, it's a paradox, of course. But it's to talk about climate changes, it's to talk about the planet, and the human rights related with the digital, with the common in the digital, and not the digital in the hands of the great oligopolies of the digital. It's about talking about a concept that I did not present it in my intervention, but it's one of the central concepts of the report. It's talking about the knowledge commons, and so the idea of the knowledge as a common good. Is talking about the problems of mobilities that were not in 48. He's talking about the problems of diversities that were not in 48. It's not only about, in 48, it was about equal rights between men and women, okay? We all agree with that. Now we have much more than that. We have much more diversities, much more rights to be considered. It's about problems related to the automation of work. It's about this. In Portugal, 100 years ago, the life expectancy was 38 years old. 38 years old. Now, it's 82 years old. It changes everything in education and in our lives. And the idea that we need to understand how to sit at the same table 4 or 5 generations at the same, it's a crucial change in our approach of humanism. And those are the questions that we need to be discussing and engaging in a world that it's going in a different direction. I know. Last time that I talk about human rights in Portugal, someone raised the hand and say, Professor, that's very nice, but the world is going in another direction. I know that the world is going in another direction, but that's not the direction I want. I still be here trying to say that maybe we can go into a different direction. And I'm not an optimistic. I think that I have no reason to be optimistic. No reason. There are no reason in the world to be optimistic. But there are two different things. One, it's about optimism. Another one, it's about hope. We can have hope without being optimistic. I'm not optimistic, but I cultivate hope. You have this the principle of hope, the Ernest Bloch, no? Where he talks about the docta spes, the hope cultivated. No? It's a cultivated hope. And the most important Brazilian educator, Paulo Freire, the last book he wrote, it was about pedagogy of hope. And so one thing is talking about hope and to try to cultivate that hope. A different thing is to be optimistic. And I'm not optimistic. But I still have hope, or I try to cultivate hope.
I can relate to that very much, but still we need to try. we need to put everything on the line for this. So and I would like to put my last question before opening up to the audience, because according to Ilona Emoto, education is one of the 6 key social tipping interventions that provide opportunities for systemic change to stabilize Earth's climate by 2050. And education is a transformative force, but it is relatively slow acting, often requiring decades to achieve widespread democratic change. And given that it typically takes about 10 years to implement change within educational systems, followed by another 10 years for those changes to take effect, we are looking at a span of at least 20 years before we could expect to see tangible benefits. Do you believe this timeline is accurate? And if so, are there strategies we can employ to accelerate this process so that educational reforms can more swiftly contribute to the critical changes we so urgently need?
I don't know. Education needs time. We need time. That nothing will be done in 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years. But we need a process. And we need to go into some kind of directions. We cannot be all the time going down and going back and going forward and going back. And what's happening in some countries, of course, which is more easy to tell, is about Afghanistan. but there are many other countries in the world. It's that we are going back. We are educating less children, and we are educating with perspectives that are not the best perspectives. What happening in Brazil a couple of years ago with President Bolsonaro, it was a tragedy for education. It was a tragedy for education when Bolsonaro was elected. The first video he has done, it was a small video in maybe 4 minutes, a video saying, I have been elected President of Brazil. And I know that in our schools, many bad things are being taught to our students about diversities, about social ideas, etc., etc. I know that. So I'm asking to the students of my country, to the children of my country, if they hear something wrong, please film with your mobile phone and send to me, because we are going to put the teacher in question. And so he was trying to transform the children of the country in a kind of police of the teachers. This is for me the worst act that I ever seen in terms of education, because it's against everything that we believe in education. The trust between a teacher and the children, the importance of the teacher-student relationship. We are trying now, maybe we will not be able to do it, because it's very difficult at UNESCO, it's very difficult, but I'm trying to launch a movement to inscribe the teacher-student relationship as world heritage. No? I'm trying to do it. It's something that it's still a little confidential, but I'm trying to. So to put in question this is to put in question freedom, is to put in question democracy, is to put in question what is a school, and things that needs to happen in school. And so, yes, it will take time. But if things went in the good direction, I will always be happy, even if it takes time. The problem for me is that we are going back, and we are going back very strongly in many things. And yesterday we saw that the first intervention of the new American president was about introducing patriotism in schools. What means to introduce patriotism in schools in this moment? It's a complicated world, but it's our world. We don't have another one, so we need to stay with this.
Yeah, we
or
need
to go to Mars, but I don't know.
We need to try everything. Thank you so much, Professor Nóvoa, for your immensely valuable insights. And let's continue the discussion with questions from the audience now. So please feel free to ask your questions and join in the conversation. I see one raised hand back there.
Well, thank you. While I agree with many things that you said tonight, it's like you said, those are no new concepts. But looking at the state of things, they have huge implications for school, for society. And while I also agree that education basically starts from the bottom, with the children, it's more or less like grassroots movements. Still, to do those concepts justice, there is the necessity for profound changes in our educational system. And that's why I want to get back, and you opened up this topic with your last answer, to the nitty-gritty of politics. How do we get policymakers on board for this change? while we are experiencing budget cuts here in Germany right now in the educational sector, while also public schools are under attack in many places in the world, like Argentina, for example?
It's a very difficult question for me in this moment of my life. Now, if you ask that question for me maybe 10 years ago, I would give you a very different answer. So I'm going to give you an answer that it's not very correct politically, but it's my state of mind in this moment. And so maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I shouldn't say what I'm going to say, but that's my... After being in education for 50 years, after assisting of so many reforms, and you were using also the concept of educational reforms, I don't believe anymore. I don't believe anymore in any educational reform. I don't believe anymore in great politics of education. I don't believe anymore in changes that can be made through ministers of education or through some planning. I know that this is not very nice to say this, but that's my state of mind in this moment. And when I look to my country and to Brazil, which has been in the last years the two countries where they have been involved, my claim, my political position is try to give voice and legitimacy to the people, to the teachers, to the schools that want to do something different. And so it's not claiming for new policies, it's not claiming for new reforms, it's not claiming because I don't believe anymore on that. After being engaged in many of these reforms, my claim is to say the ones who want. Many teachers doesn't want to change. That's okay, I can't do nothing. If a teacher doesn't want to change, I can't do nothing. I can't oblige him. It's impossible. If a school doesn't want to change, it's almost impossible to change a school. There are a wonderful book by two American historians of education, David Tyack and Larry Coven, where they explain that it's impossible. So what I say is the teachers that want, the schools that want, the places where there are some kind of energy, some kind of willing to do different things, let's try to create a movement, a legitimacy, a space for these people to do in a different way. Hoping, and maybe it's an ingenuity, I don't know, but hoping that from these new experiences and from these new dynamics, it can go to other places and it can go to other schools. So my state of mind in this moment of my life is to try to work and to try to create political conditions and social conditions for the teachers that want to do different, that they can do it. And they are not, and that they are not destroyed by bureaucrats, they are not destroyed by the directors of the schools, they are not destroyed by other colleagues, that they can have that space, that they can have that legitimacy, they can publicize what they are doing, they can share what they are doing, they can go public with their experiences. That's what I believe in this moment. I don't believe anymore in kind of... This said, I know that there are good ministers of education, bad ministers of education, good policies, better ones, but I don't know. in a sense, I'm going to say one thing that probably, if someone here says that I have said it, I will say, no, I didn't say that. Because I don't like the French President Macron. I don't like his approach, I don't like the way, what he's doing, so I'm not... but 2 years ago, in the opening of the school year, he gave a very interesting speech during 1 hour. And during 1 hour, he said, don't wait nothing from us. Don't wait, he was addressing to teachers and to families, don't wait nothing from us. Don't wait nothing from me. Don't wait nothing from the Minister of Education that is seated there. Don't wait nothing from that. We can't do nothing. The only thing that we can maybe do, is to try to support some initiatives that you can do. And so the ones that can do these initiatives, ask us to support you, ask us to help in this process, and that's why I believe in this moment. It's a little voluntaristic, it's a little of ingenuity, but it's what is changing. It's what is changing some public schools, for instance, in my country. I have done recently a visit during 2 months in my car. I stopped 1 day in a school, and then I went to another school and stopped 1 day in a school. So I lived 2 months in my car and visiting schools, public schools. And in half of these schools, I saw different things happening because of the initiative of teachers, sometimes of the initiative of schools, not because of the policies at the level of the Ministry of Education and so on. But that's the answer that I'm telling you now. 10 years ago, my answer would be very, very different from now. So we change, and we change in our moments of life, and we change in the things that we believe and we don't believe, and in educational reforms, I don't believe anymore.
Are there any more questions? The microphone is coming.
Yeah, thank you very much for your talk. I like the idea of conviviality. And I also like the idea of making the teacher-student relationship a sort of a cultural heritage thing. But with the conviviality, it strikes me that that has always been at the heart of any type of education situation. So when we think about the Greek philosophy schools or the great library of Alexandria, or in fact the beginnings of universities, which were mainly about people sitting around a table. And I was just wondering, so with schools, but also with universities, what does it need to have conviviality or to generate and produce conviviality?
Mm-hmm. I think that again, let me answer you the story. I have a children. My children is now, I don't know exactly what is the age, but probably 36 or 37 or something like that. And he has made a brilliant career as a student and a scholar at the university. He has graduated in history, then he has made a master in anthropology in a different university, and then he has made a PhD in geography in a different university in England, and then he went to a postdoc in Boston, invited, and then he came back to Portugal with a very good position in a public university in Portugal. And like 5 years ago, so he was 32, 33, he arrived at home and he told me, Father, it's not your problem, it's not your question, but I just want you to know that I quit from the university. I don't want anymore to be at the university. And they say, André, it's your life, it's your salary, it's your career, it's for... And he told me one phrase that I have never forgot. He told me, put in your mind that in your universities, nothing interesting is happening. Nothing interesting is happening in your universities. I say, they are not my universities, your universities. Right? Nothing is happening. The important things in the world about curiosity, about creativity, about freedom, about doing things that you are interested are outside universities, are in other space. And I don't want to be anymore in your universities. Right? And he went to do different things, and he's very happy what he's doing, very in a different life. I think that the problem of universities, for me, it's this problem. It's that the young generation don't recognize anymore the university where the place where they can be together, doing interesting things, doing things where they are involved, doing things with curiosity, learning things different. I think that they don't feel universities anymore like this. And our challenge, our main challenge, is not only to design wonderful courses, wonderful degrees, to design wonderful curriculum, to design and to planning very well, and we spend our time in this, no? But trying to create the conditions in our rooms, in our classrooms, in our buildings, in our relations, for this kind of curiosity, for things to happen, for different things to happen. And of course that I was very mad with my children, very mad with him. But he's right. I know that he's right. I know that he's right. And probably if I was from his generation, I probably will do the same thing. And I'm happy that he found a new life in a different place, he says. But the other day he was telling me, I just can give you a consolation. No? And what is the consolation? Is that I think that for my new life, many things that I learned in universities were useful. So it's a consolation to you. No? And I told you, okay, thank you very much, you know, that at least I have that consolation that you learn in things. But that's for me, it's really to create the conditions, no? To create the conditions for people to come together and to engage, and not only to go to the classes, not only to see things online and do the degrees. And okay, the degrees are important, yes, they are important, but life at the universities need to be in a sense different, and for that we need lots of freedom. Freedom is for me a question, because I know I don't want. I say all the time, I'm arriving at a moment of my life where I don't want to convince anyone. I don't want to convince anyone, and so I don't want to convince you to change. I don't. If you want to do different things, let's do. But if you don't want, you don't do. I don't want to lose my energy with. And I think that we are putting our energy not in the right places, not in the right. And then we have very good strategic plans. We have very good curriculums. We have very good, etc., etc., etc. But we don't have the conditions for that curiosity, for that engagement together, for that conviviality. But maybe I'm being too critical to universities, but I'm doing that from the inside. I'm doing that as someone that lives in university. Universities are my life. But maybe I'm being too critical, but I think that we are losing something. We are losing something in the middle of, I don't know. I need to stop with this criticism of universities.
I think we could go on listening to you for hours, and I have lots of more questions, but we have run out of time, unfortunately. Let me once again thank you, Professor Nóvoa, very much for coming to Gießen today and for giving us the opportunity to reimagine the futures of education together. We will continue this conversation within this lecture series on February 10th at 7 p.m. or more precisely at 7:15 p.m. with a lecture by Natascha Strobel on the topic of radicalized conservatism in the public sphere. In German, radikalisierter Konservatismus in der Öffentlichkeit. And for tonight, it only remains for me to once again express my gratitude to you, Professor Nóvoa, and also to everyone else in the audience and online for your interest. I wish those who have come to the Aula a safe journey home and everyone else a continued good evening.
Thank you. Thank you.